Everyone thought the Omega needed someone to save her, until she looked the strongest alpha in the kingdom in the eyes and challenged him. The grand halls of Ravensire Palace had witnessed countless moments of power, but nothing had ever created a silence like the one that followed Claire Anderson's arrival. In a kingdom where strength determined respect and status decided a person's place, an Omega girl with a walking difficulty had stepped into a world that was never built to welcome her. Claire knew the whispers would come before she even entered the royal hall. She knew people would notice the way she moved before they noticed the way she thought. For years, she had lived with the judgment of others, people who believed a physical limitation meant a person could never be strong. But Claire had learned something important long ago. The opinions of others did not decide her worth. Her choices did. At 25 years old, Claire had become known throughout the kingdom as a quiet but determined Omega who refused to accept pity. She helped heal injured villagers, supported those who felt forgotten, and offered kindness even when kindness was not always returned. She never wanted sympathy. She wanted to be seen for who she truly was. That was why she stood inside the royal hall that day. Not because she believed she was equal to the most powerful people in the room by title, but because she believed every person deserved the chance to prove themselves. At the center of the hall stood Alpha King Alexander Blackwood, the ruler of the Werewolf Kingdom. His presence commanded attention without needing a single word. For years, warriors, nobles, and leaders had lowered their eyes before him. They respected his strength, his wisdom, and his ability to protect the kingdom. But Claire did something nobody expected. She looked directly at him. The room became still. Many believed an Omega should remain quiet in front of an Alpha King. They expected hesitation. They expected fear. Instead, Claire offered a small, confident smile. Alexander studied her carefully. He had met many people who wanted something from him. Some wanted power. Some wanted influence. Some wanted recognition. But Claire seemed different. She did not appear interested in impressing anyone. She simply stood there with a calm confidence that caught his attention. Then Claire spoke words that shocked everyone in the hall. "Catch me if you can." The nobles exchanged surprised looks. They could not understand why an Omega who had spent her life being underestimated would challenge the most powerful Alpha in the kingdom. But Claire was not challenging him because she wanted to win. She was challenging the idea that people like her should always be considered weak. For the first time in years, Alexander found himself unable to look away. Behind her gentle expression was a courage he had rarely seen. The Alpha King had faced many challenges throughout his reign, but this was different. This was not a battle of strength. It was a moment that questioned everything he believed about power. And as the entire kingdom watched, the girl everyone had underestimated unknowingly took the first step toward changing the heart of an Alpha King. The silence inside Ravensire Palace remained long after Claire Anderson's unexpected words echoed through the royal hall. Everyone had heard the confidence in her voice, but few understood where it came from. To many people watching that day, Claire was still the Omega they had always overlooked. They saw the walking difficulty she carried, the simple clothes she wore, and the lack of a powerful family name behind her. They did not see the years she spent building a strength that could not be measured by appearance. Claire had grown up in a world where people often decided who she was before learning her story. Some believed an Omega should stay away from important matters. Others believed someone with a physical limitation could never stand beside those born with power. But Claire had never allowed those beliefs to become her own. She remembered every moment when someone underestimated her, not with bitterness, but with determination. Those moments taught her that confidence was not something given by others. It was something a person created within themselves. After the royal gathering ended, whispers followed her through the palace halls. Some nobles laughed quietly, convinced she had made a mistake by speaking so boldly to the Alpha King. They believed Alexander Blackwood would simply dismiss her confidence as foolishness. But the Alpha King did not react the way they expected. Instead, he found himself thinking about her words. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted to prove their strength to him. Yet Claire had done something completely different. She had not tried to impress him. She had not asked for special treatment. She had simply refused to accept the limits others placed on her. Later that evening, Alexander watched from the palace balcony as Claire walked through the gardens below. She moved carefully but confidently, taking her time without shame or hesitation. There was no frustration in her expression. There was only peace. The Alpha King realized that many people spent their lives hiding the parts of themselves they believed others would judge. Claire did the opposite. She carried her differences openly and refused to let them define her. Meanwhile, Claire continued her daily routine as if nothing unusual had happened. She helped the palace healers organize their supplies, assisted servants who needed support, and spent time caring for the royal gardens. She did not know that her simple actions were being noticed by someone who rarely paid attention to ordinary moments. Alexander began asking questions about her past. He learned that Claire had never sought influence or recognition. She had simply chosen kindness every day, even when the world gave her reasons to become distant. The more he discovered, the more curious he became. He began to wonder if the kingdom had been measuring strength in the wrong way for generations. Perhaps true strength was not always found in speed, physical ability, or the power to command others. Perhaps it was found in the courage to keep moving forward when others expected someone to stop. And for the first time in many years, the Alpha King found himself wanting to understand someone rather than simply judge them. The days following Claire Anderson's unexpected moment with Alpha King Alexander Blackwood brought a quiet curiosity throughout Ravensshire. The nobles who once ignored her now watched more carefully, trying to understand why their ruler had shown interest in an Omega they believed was ordinary. But Claire remained unchanged. She did not suddenly seek attention or attempt to prove herself to the people who doubted her. She continued living the same way she always had, choosing kindness even when nobody was there to praise her. Every morning, Claire visited the palace healing rooms, organizing herbs and assisting those who needed support. She listened to the concerns of others, offered encouragement, and treated everyone with the same respect regardless of their position. To Claire, a person's value was never determined by their title. It was determined by the way they treated others when nothing was expected in return. Alexander continued observing her from a distance. The Alpha King had spent most of his life surrounded by warriors and leaders who measured everything through strength. In his world, confidence was often shown through authority, and respect was usually earned through power. But Claire represented something he had rarely encountered. She carried confidence without arrogance. She showed courage without needing to prove she was stronger than anyone else. One afternoon, Alexander visited the palace gardens where Claire was caring for a collection of rare plants. He expected a formal conversation, but Claire greeted him naturally, as if he were simply another person. That surprised him. Most people changed their behavior when they were near the Alpha King. They became careful with every word and every expression. Claire did not. She respected his position, but she did not forget her own worth. Alexander asked her why she challenged him in the royal hall. Claire smiled softly and explained that she was not trying to embarrass him. She simply wanted people to understand that limitations did not erase someone's abilities. She had spent years hearing what she could not do, and she decided that she would rather focus on what she could accomplish. Her answer stayed with Alexander long after their conversation ended. He realized Claire was not fighting against the world. She was simply refusing to let the world decide who she was. However, not everyone in Ravensshire appreciated the attention Claire received. Victor Hayes, a noble alpha from an influential family, believed the kingdom was changing too quickly. He viewed Claire's confidence as a challenge to the traditions he valued. In his eyes, an Omega with a physical limitation should never become someone the Alpha King respected. But Alexander began seeing the situation differently. He understood that protecting old beliefs was not the same as protecting the kingdom. A society could only grow when it recognized the worth of every person within it. Meanwhile, Claire continued unaware of the conversations happening around her. She did not know that the Alpha King was beginning to question ideas he had accepted for years. She did not know that her simple actions were creating a change throughout the palace. She only knew that she wanted to live honestly and treat others with compassion. But fate had already placed her on a path that would bring her closer to the most powerful man in the kingdom. And soon, everyone would discover that the girl they underestimated was never truly weak at all. The morning fog covered the ancient towers of Ravensshire as the kingdom slowly began to notice a change that nobody expected. The name Claire Anderson, once barely mentioned outside the quiet corners of the palace, had started becoming a symbol of curiosity. Some people still saw her as the Omega with a physical limitation, but others had begun to see something different. They were beginning to see the confidence, patience, and kindness that had always been there. Claire never searched for approval. She continued her daily work, helping the palace healers, organizing supplies, and offering support to those who needed a kind word. Yet every small action created a larger impact than she realized. In the royal court, Alpha King Alexander Blackwood listened as the nobles discussed Claire's growing influence. Many questioned why an Omega without a powerful family background had gained the attention of the kingdom's ruler. Victor Hayes was among the loudest voices expressing concern. He believed the traditions of the werewolf kingdom existed for a reason, and he feared that accepting someone like Claire would change the order he had always known. Alexander listened carefully, but something inside him had already started changing. He remembered the moment Claire looked at him without fear. He remembered the confidence behind her words and the honesty in her expression. She had not challenged his authority. She had challenged the belief that strength could only be measured in one way. Later that day, Alexander invited Claire to the training courtyard. The invitation surprised many members of the palace because the courtyard was usually reserved for warriors and leaders. Some expected Claire to feel uncomfortable there, but she arrived with the same calm expression she always carried. Alexander wanted to understand her perspective. He asked how she maintained her confidence after years of being judged by others. Claire looked across the courtyard and quietly explained that she once believed the opinions of others defined her. But over time, she learned that a person's worth could not be taken away by someone else's misunderstanding. She admitted that life had been challenging, but those challenges taught her patience, creativity, and empathy. Alexander listened without interruption. For the first time, he realized that Claire's strength came from experiences that many people would have allowed to break their spirit. She had transformed difficult moments into wisdom. Meanwhile, rumors continued spreading throughout Ravensshire. Some believed Claire had captured the Alpha King's attention through clever words. Others believed there was something special about her that nobody understood yet. But Claire remained focused on helping others. She did not know that the most powerful person in the kingdom was beginning to see her differently. She did not know that every act of kindness was slowly changing the way people viewed strength itself. As the sun set over the palace walls, Alexander stood watching the kingdom below. He had spent years searching for the qualities of a great leader, but now he wondered if he had overlooked something important. Perhaps the strongest people were not always the ones who stood above everyone else. Perhaps they were the ones who continued moving forward even when the world expected them to stop. And somewhere inside Ravensshire, the future of the kingdom was quietly beginning to change. The days that followed brought a quiet shift throughout Ravensshire. The kingdom had not changed overnight, but something important had begun to move beneath the surface. People who once looked away when Claire Anderson entered a room were now watching her with curiosity. They still remembered the Omega who was underestimated because of her physical limitation, but they were beginning to notice the qualities that had always defined her. Claire did not seek attention. She did not ask anyone to change their opinions. She simply continued living with the same kindness and determination that had guided her for years. Inside the palace healing rooms, Claire spent her mornings preparing remedies, organizing supplies, and assisting those who needed help. She treated every person with the same patience, whether they were servants, guards, or members of noble families. To Claire, respect was never something that belonged only to those with power. It was something every person deserved. Alpha King Alexander Blackwood continued learning more about her life. The more he discovered, the more he understood that Claire's confidence was not something that appeared suddenly in the royal hall. It had been built through years of challenges, quiet moments, and choices that nobody had noticed. She had faced countless situations where others expected her to give up, yet she continued forward without allowing disappointment to control her heart. One evening, Alexander met Claire near the ancient gardens behind the palace. The area was peaceful, filled with the scent of flowers and the sound of a gentle breeze moving through the trees. Unlike the formal conversations inside the royal chambers, this moment felt different. There was no audience watching them, no nobles waiting to judge every word. Alexander asked Claire if she ever wished her life had been easier. Claire paused for a moment before answering. She admitted that there were days when she wondered what life would have been like without the challenges she faced. But she also believed those experiences shaped the person she became. They taught her understanding, They taught her patience. Most importantly, they taught her how to see the struggles of others. Alexander listened carefully. As the ruler of the werewolf kingdom, he had always focused on protecting his people through strength and authority. But Claire showed him another kind of protection. Sometimes people did not need someone to fight for them. Sometimes they needed someone to believe they were capable. Their conversation was interrupted when a royal messenger arrived with news from the council. Several nobles had begun questioning whether Claire should continue receiving the Alpha King's attention. Victor Hayes had gathered support from those who believed tradition should never change. They argued that an Omega with a physical limitation could not represent the future of the kingdom. When Alexander heard this, he did not respond with anger. Instead, he felt a deeper understanding of the problem. The issue was never Claire's ability. The issue was the narrow way many people viewed strength. Later that night, Claire stood beneath the stars outside the palace walls, unaware of the discussions happening around her. She believed she was simply living her life and helping others whenever she could. But her actions had already started something much larger. The kingdom was beginning to question old beliefs, and the Alpha King was beginning to realize that the person who changed his perspective was the very person everyone else had overlooked. The morning light reached across the towers of Ravensheim as the kingdom prepared for a day that would quietly change the way many people saw the world around them. For years, the werewolf kingdom had measured strength through physical ability, family name, and the power someone could display in front of others. But Claire Anderson had slowly begun proving something different. Strength could also exist in patience, courage, and the determination to keep going when others expected someone to stop. The royal council gathered inside the palace chambers, and Claire was invited to attend. Many nobles were surprised by her presence. Some exchanged uncertain looks, wondering why an Omega with a walking difficulty was being given a place among important leaders. Claire noticed their hesitation, but she did not allow it to affect her. She had spent years learning that confidence did not come from being accepted by everyone. It came from knowing who you were even when others misunderstood you. Alpha King Alexander Blackwood entered the chamber, and the room immediately became quiet. Everyone expected him to follow the old traditions. They expected him to dismiss the concerns about Claire or avoid creating conflict among the nobles. Instead, Alexander calmly looked around the room and asked everyone to speak honestly. Victor Hayes stepped forward and explained that many believed the kingdom was moving too quickly. He questioned whether someone like Claire could truly represent the values of Ravensheim. The words were difficult to hear, but Claire remained composed. She did not argue with anger. She simply listened. When it was her turn to respond, Claire explained that she never wanted anyone to pretend her challenges did not exist. She knew her life was different. She knew some things required more patience and creativity. But she also knew that a person should not be judged only by what they struggled with. They should be recognized for what they continued to accomplish despite those struggles. Her words created a silence deeper than any argument could have. Even the nobles who disagreed found themselves thinking about what she said. Alexander watched the room carefully. He realized that Claire had done something remarkable. She had changed the conversation without demanding power. She had earned attention without seeking control. After the meeting, Alexander walked with Claire through the palace gardens. He told her that many leaders spent their entire lives trying to convince others they were strong. Claire had done the opposite. She never tried to appear perfect. She simply showed the truth of who she was. Claire smiled and told him that everyone carried something others could not see. Some people carried doubts. Some carried fears. Some carried responsibilities. What mattered was how they chose to continue forward. Those words stayed with Alexander. For the first time, he understood that being a great ruler was not only about protecting the kingdom from outside threats. It was also about changing the beliefs that prevented people from seeing each other clearly. As the sun began to set over Ravensheim, whispers throughout the palace started changing. The Omega who had once been viewed as fragile was now becoming someone people respected. Claire did not know how far her influence would reach, but one thing was certain. She had already changed the heart of the Alpha King, and soon the entire kingdom would begin seeing her in a completely different light. The days after the council meeting brought a quiet transformation throughout Ravensheim. The kingdom was not completely changed yet, but the way people looked at Claire Anderson had begun to shift. Those who once saw only her physical limitation were now beginning to notice the qualities that had always been part of her. They saw her patience when others were frustrated. They saw her kindness when nobody was watching. They saw the courage it took to stand before powerful figures and remain true to herself. Claire never expected admiration. She never wanted people to praise her simply because her life had been more difficult. She wanted something much simpler. She wanted to be treated as a person with dreams, abilities, and a place in the world. Meanwhile, Alpha King Alexander Blackwood continued facing pressure from the traditional nobles of Ravensshire. Many respected him, but some feared that accepting change would weaken the old structure of the kingdom. Victor Hayes became the strongest voice against Claire's growing recognition. He believed the kingdom should continue judging people by the standards it had followed for generations. To him, strength was something that could only be seen through physical ability and status. Alexander listened to these concerns, but he no longer viewed them the same way. Before meeting Claire, he might have accepted those ideas without question. Now, he understood that traditions were only valuable when they protected people, not when they limited them. One afternoon, Alexander invited Claire to join a small gathering with members of the palace staff and younger werewolf families. He wanted others to hear her perspective directly instead of judging her through rumors. Claire was surprised by the invitation, but she agreed. During the gathering, people asked about her experiences and how she remained hopeful despite the difficulties she faced. Claire answered honestly. She explained that she had difficult days just like anyone else. She had moments of doubt. She had moments when she wished the world was easier to navigate. But she learned that waiting for the world to change was not enough. Sometimes a person had to show others a different way of seeing. Her words touched many people in the room because they were not spoken from pride. They were spoken from understanding. Alexander watched as the audience listened carefully. He realized Claire had a rare ability. She did not make people feel guilty for their mistakes. She made them want to become better. However, Victor continued believing that Claire's influence was dangerous. He saw her acceptance as a challenge to the values he had protected for years. He began gathering support from those who feared change, preparing to question Alexander's decisions before the entire kingdom. Claire remained unaware of the growing tension. She continued helping others and living with the same quiet determination. She believed every person deserved kindness, even those who did not understand her. That belief was exactly what made Alexander respect her even more. The Alpha King had spent years searching for the qualities that created a true leader. He had looked for confidence, intelligence, and strength. But now he understood that another quality mattered just as much. A great leader needed the ability to see the people others ignored. And as the kingdom moved closer to a moment of decision, Claire stood at the center of a change she never asked for, but had already inspired. The tension throughout Ravensshire grew stronger as the kingdom approached a moment that would define its future. For generations, people had accepted the idea that strength could only be measured by what others could see. Physical ability, family name, and social position had determined who received respect and who remained unnoticed. But Claire Anderson had quietly challenged those beliefs without ever trying to create conflict. She had not demanded a place among the powerful. She had simply shown that a person's value was never limited by what others assumed. As rumors continued spreading through the palace, Claire remained focused on the work that mattered to her. She spent her mornings helping the healing staff, offering guidance to younger members of the kingdom, and supporting those who felt overlooked. She never realized that the same qualities people once ignored had become the reason so many were beginning to admire her. Alpha King Alexander Blackwood watched these changes carefully. He had seen kingdoms rise and fall because leaders refused to listen. He understood that ignoring the concerns of ordinary people could create distance between those in power and those they served. Claire reminded him that leadership was not about standing above others. It was about standing with them. One evening, Alexander invited Claire to walk through the ancient gardens of Ravensshire. The moonlight covered the paths, and the quiet surroundings allowed them to speak without the pressure of the royal court. Alexander admitted that before meeting her, he believed he understood what strength meant. He thought strength came from being able to protect others, make difficult choices, and carry responsibility alone. Claire listened before telling him that those qualities were important, but strength also came from knowing when to understand instead of judge. She explained that everyone carried challenges others could not see. Some people carried physical struggles. Others carried fears, regrets, or responsibilities. What mattered was not whether someone faced difficulties. What mattered was how they continued forward. Alexander realized that Claire had changed the way he viewed the entire kingdom. She had never tried to prove she was better than anyone else. She had only shown that she deserved the same chance as everyone else. Meanwhile, Victor Hayes continued trying to convince the nobles that the kingdom was losing its traditions. He believed accepting Claire would encourage others to question the old ways. But the more he spoke against her, the more people began noticing the kindness and fairness she represented. The very thing he feared was already happening. The kingdom was learning to see people differently. As the days passed, more citizens began supporting Claire. They remembered the moments when she helped them, listened to them, and treated them with respect when others ignored them. Her influence did not come from a title or a position. It came from the trust she built naturally. Alexander understood that a decision about Claire was no longer just about One Omega. It was about the future of Ravensheim itself. The kingdom had reached a turning point, and the Alpha King knew he had to choose whether to protect old expectations or embrace a better path forward. Standing beside Claire, he realized the answer had been clear all along. The person everyone underestimated had shown them the meaning of true strength. The morning sun rose above Ravensheim, shining across a kingdom that no longer looked at the world the same way. The halls of the palace, once filled with quiet judgment and old expectations, now carried conversations about change, understanding, and the meaning of true strength. Claire Anderson stood at the center of that transformation, not because she had demanded a place there, but because she had shown everyone that respect could be earned through compassion and courage. The day of the final royal gathering arrived, and every important figure in the kingdom gathered inside the grand chamber. Nobles, healers, servants, and leaders all waited to hear the decision of Alpha King Alexander Blackwood. For years, the kingdom had followed traditions without question. But now, everyone understood that the choice before them was larger than one person. It represented the future of Ravensheim. Victor Hayes stood among the nobles who still believed the old ways should remain untouched. He looked at Claire and saw only the limitations others had always noticed. But the rest of the room saw something different. They saw the Omega who had helped people without expecting recognition. They saw the woman who remained kind even when she was misunderstood. They saw someone who had proven her strength without needing to change who she was. Alexander stepped forward, and the room became silent. He spoke about the responsibility of leadership and the importance of seeing beyond appearances. He explained that a kingdom could not become stronger by ignoring the talents and hearts of its people. Strength was not only found in physical ability or powerful bloodlines. It was also found in resilience, wisdom, and the courage to continue when life became difficult. Claire listened quietly as the Alpha King honored the qualities she had carried all along. She never wanted to be celebrated because of what she had overcome. She wanted people to understand that she had value from the beginning. That realization was what changed the hearts of those around her. After the gathering, Claire walked through the palace gardens where she had spent many peaceful mornings. The flowers were blooming, and the same paths that once felt unfamiliar now felt like home. Alexander joined her, and for a moment, the weight of his title disappeared. He was no longer only the Alpha King. He was someone who had learned from another person's courage. He told Claire that she had changed the way he viewed his kingdom. She had reminded him that leadership was not about being the strongest person in the room. It was about making sure others had the opportunity to show their own strength. Claire smiled and told him that everyone deserved to be seen beyond the first thing people noticed about them. Those words stayed with Alexander, just as they had from the beginning. Months later, Ravensheim continued to change. The kingdom became a place where people were judged less by what they lacked and more by what they offered. Claire became a symbol of hope, not because she was perfect, but because she proved that imperfections did not prevent someone from making a difference. And the Alpha King, who once believed strength had only one definition, discovered the greatest lesson of all. The strongest hearts are often the ones the world chooses to underestimate first.